The women's 5,000 meters final delivered one of the most fascinating tactical battles of the championship, a race that demonstrated how patience, strength, positioning, and race intelligence can be just as important as raw speed. Entering the final, there was no overwhelming favorite. Several major names were absent, choosing to focus on future international objectives, which created an opportunity for a large group of athletes to believe that a medal, and perhaps even gold, was within reach. With 22 athletes on the start line, the race immediately presented a challenge. Large championship fields often create uncertainty because very few athletes are willing to commit to an aggressive pace early. Nobody wants to become an unwilling pacemaker and provide a free ride for rivals possessing superior finishing speed. As a result, the opening stages unfolded cautiously, with athletes closely grouped together and constantly fighting for position while conserving energy. The first kilometer passed in approximately 3:01, a pace that was respectable but far from aggressive by international standards. At that tempo, almost every athlete in the field remained comfortable. The large pack moved as a single unit, and it was clear that the race was still waiting for someone willing to take responsibility. That responsibility eventually fell to Norway's Caroline Bjørkeli Grøvdal. The experienced Norwegian understood the nature of championship racing perfectly. She knew that allowing the pace to remain slow would increase the chances of athletes with faster finishing speed. Instead of waiting for others to make a move, she gradually took control of the race and began applying pressure in the most effective way possible. What made Grøvdal's strategy so impressive was that she did not launch a dramatic surge. There was no reckless acceleration. Instead, she increased the pace little by little, forcing the field to work harder with every lap. The second kilometer was faster than the first. The third kilometer was faster again. Then came another increase. Each acceleration was small enough to avoid destroying her own rhythm, but significant enough to slowly drain the energy reserves of her competitors. This is one of the oldest and most effective tactics in distance running. Rather than attacking once, an athlete repeatedly increases the pace until rivals begin to reach their limits. Every lap becomes slightly more painful. Every lap forces difficult decisions. Eventually, weaker athletes begin to lose contact. That is exactly what happened. As Grøvdal continued driving the race forward, the field started to stretch. The large pack that had looked so comfortable during the opening kilometers gradually transformed into smaller groups. Athletes who had hoped for a tactical race suddenly found themselves struggling to maintain contact. The pace changes exposed weaknesses. Some runners were capable of handling a fast final sprint, but lacked the endurance to repeatedly absorb sustained pressure. Others had entered the race in good form, but simply could not respond to the relentless tempo being set at the front. Meanwhile, Nadia Batticletti of Italy remained calm. Throughout the middle stages of the race, Batticletti executed one of the smartest tactical performances of the championship. She never allowed Grøvdal to gain separation, but she also refused to waste unnecessary energy by taking the lead herself. Every move by the Norwegian was immediately matched. Every acceleration was covered, yet Batticletti remained tucked in behind, allowing Grøvdal to face the wind and carry the burden of pacemaking. Positioning in championship distance races is often underestimated. Saving even a small amount of energy over 5,000 meters can make the difference between winning gold and finishing outside the medals. Batticletti understood this perfectly. Behind the leading pair, several dangerous contenders attempted to remain in contention. Marta Garcia of Spain continued to hold a strong position near the front. Germany's Hanna Klein remained patient. Finland's Natalie Blomqvist stayed connected despite the increasing pace. Portugal's Mariana Machado also fought hard to remain in the lead group. However, as Grøvdal continued applying pressure, the number of realistic medal contenders steadily decreased. At 3,000 meters, the race had already changed significantly from its opening stages. The large field had become an elite selection of athletes capable of handling the increasing intensity. The tempo was no longer comfortable. Every lap required concentration and commitment. What stood out most was Grøvdal's consistency. Her kilometer splits revealed a runner who knew exactly what she was doing. Rather than producing one spectacular move, She created a series of controlled accelerations. The race became an exercise in attrition. One athlete after another began to disappear from contention. With 2 laps remaining, the race entered its decisive phase. Gruvdahl was still leading. Battacleti was still following. Garcia remained within striking distance. The remaining athletes were fighting desperately to stay connected. At this point, every runner knew that a medal was close, but they also knew that one mistake could end their chances immediately. The penultimate lap often determines championship distance races, and this final was no exception. Gruvdahl increased the pressure once again. The acceleration was enough to break several more athletes. Gaps began appearing throughout the lead group. The race that had started with 22 athletes now revolved around only a handful of contenders. Yet despite all the work being done by the Norwegian, Battacleti still looked remarkably comfortable. That visual impression became increasingly important. While Gruvdahl was showing signs of effort, Battacleti appeared composed. Her stride remained efficient, her posture remained controlled. She looked like an athlete waiting for the perfect moment, rather than one struggling to survive. As the bell rang for the final lap, the atmosphere inside the stadium changed immediately. 1 lap remained. 400 meters separated the athletes from a European title. Gruvdahl continued fighting bravely at the front. She had invested enormous physical and mental energy into shaping the race. Without her, the final would likely have remained tactical and slow. She had forced everyone into a genuine endurance contest. But now came the final examination. Entering the last 200 meters, Battacleti made her move. The acceleration was immediate and decisive. After following Gruvdahl for almost the entire race, the Italian finally shifted gears. Within seconds, the gap began to grow. The Norwegian attempted to respond, but the response never came. Battacleti had another level available, and she used it at exactly the right moment. The contrast was striking. Gruvdahl had spent nearly 12 laps controlling the race, but Battacleti had conserved just enough energy to produce a devastating finishing kick. The Italians surged clear while the crowd erupted in celebration. Behind them, the battle for bronze continued fiercely. Garcia fought hard and successfully secured a place on the podium, rewarding a disciplined and courageous performance throughout the race. At the finish line, Battacleti crossed in 14:35.29, a championship record and a massive personal best. The result represented far more than simply a fast time. It was the perfect demonstration of championship racing. Battacleti combined patience, tactical awareness, positioning, endurance, and finishing speed. She never panicked. She never wasted energy. She trusted her strengths and executed her race plan flawlessly. For Gruvdahl, the silver medal was both painful and admirable. She had done the hardest work in the race and transformed what could have been a slow tactical affair into a demanding endurance battle. Her front-running courage eliminated many rivals and created the conditions for a memorable final. Although she could not match Battacleti's finishing speed, her performance showcased exceptional racing intelligence and determination. The race ultimately highlighted a fundamental truth of championship distance running. Victory is rarely awarded to the strongest athlete alone. Success requires understanding pace, positioning, timing, and psychology. Every decision matters. Every meter matters. Nadia Battacleti mastered every one of those elements. By combining tactical patience with explosive finishing speed, she delivered one of the finest performances of the championship and secured a historic European title in unforgettable fashion. While the final result will forever show Nadia Battacleti as the champion, the deeper story of this race lies in how the competition evolved from a crowded tactical contest into a brutal examination of endurance and decision-making. Championship finals are often won long before the finishing straight, and this 5,000-meter final provided a perfect example of that reality. One of the most fascinating aspects of the race was the contrast between different racing philosophies. Several athletes entered the final knowing they possessed strong finishing speed. Their ideal scenario was obvious: maintain a controlled pace for as long as possible, keep the field together, and rely on a final sprint during the last lap. Others understood that such a race would reduce their chances of victory. For those athletes, the objective was to create fatigue before the finishing kick could become decisive. Carolina Bjerkeli Grøvdal belonged firmly to the second category. The Norwegian has built her career on strength, consistency, and exceptional endurance. At 33 years old, she arrived with years of championship experience and a reputation as one of Europe's most intelligent distance racers. She understood exactly what kind of race would maximize her chances of winning. From the moment she moved to the front, her objective became clear. She was not trying to run away from the field with one explosive surge. Instead, she was trying to remove athletes one by one through sustained pressure. That strategy is often more effective than dramatic attacks. A sudden acceleration can be covered by fresh competitors. A gradual increase repeated over multiple laps is much harder to survive. Every athlete has a limit, and Grøvdal spent the middle stages of the race searching for those limits. The numbers reveal just how effective her approach was. After opening with a controlled first kilometer, she progressively increased the tempo. The field was no longer jogging comfortably together. Instead, athletes were forced to make constant adjustments. Every acceleration demanded a response. Every response required energy. Distance runners often describe these moments as small decisions during a race. Do you close a 2-meter gap immediately, or do you wait? Do you move around another runner, or remain boxed in? Do you spend energy now, or save it for later? Those decisions accumulate over 5,000 meters. By the halfway point, several contenders were already paying the price for earlier efforts. The smooth rhythm that existed during the opening laps had disappeared. Athletes who looked relaxed at 1,000 meters were beginning to show visible signs of strain. What made Bjerkeli's performance particularly impressive was her ability to remain completely composed while the race became increasingly difficult. Many athletes respond emotionally when the pace changes. They panic, they surge unnecessarily. They waste energy trying to prove they are still comfortable. Bjerkeli did none of those things. Instead, she trusted the race. Whenever Grøvdal accelerated, Bjerkeli followed. Whenever gaps appeared behind them, Bjerkeli remained patient. She never attempted to take control prematurely because she understood that the race leader was already doing exactly what she needed. In many ways, Bjerkeli was racing two events simultaneously. The first event was the physical race taking place on the track. The second was the strategic contest unfolding inside her mind. She was constantly evaluating Grøvdal's condition, monitoring the reactions of other competitors, and calculating how much energy she still possessed for the closing stages. That level of awareness separates champions from contenders. As the race approached 4,000 meters, the effects of Grøvdal's work became increasingly visible. The lead group had shrunk dramatically. Athletes who entered the race with realistic medal ambitions were now fighting simply to maintain contact. This was especially significant because the field contained runners with a wide variety of strengths. Some possessed excellent personal bests, over 1,500 meters. Others specialized in cross-country competition. Some were proven championship performers. Others were emerging talents seeking their breakthrough moment. Yet Grøvdal's pace was neutralizing those differences. The race was becoming less about raw speed and more about resilience. One by one, athletes drifted off the back of the lead group. Small gaps became larger gaps. Once contact was lost, recovering became nearly impossible. The psychological impact of these moments cannot be overstated. When a runner sees a gap opening ahead, panic often follows. The athlete knows the leaders are accelerating. The athlete knows the medal positions are slipping away. Yet the body is already operating near its limit. Every championship final contains these critical moments where dreams begin to disappear. For some athletes, the final kilometer represented an opportunity. For others, it represented survival. At the front, however, the picture remained remarkably stable. Grøvdal continued leading. Bjerkeli continued following. Neither athlete appeared willing to reveal everything before the final lap. That situation created enormous tension. Everyone watching understood that the race was approaching a decisive confrontation. The only unanswered question was whether Gruvdal had managed to take enough energy out of Batacleti before the sprint began. The answer arrived gradually. As the final laps unfolded, Batacleti's body language remained almost unchanged. Her stride looked smooth. Her shoulders remained relaxed. Most importantly, she continued occupying the perfect tactical position directly behind the leader. In championship racing, positioning often reflects confidence. Athletes who are struggling typically begin losing contact. They drift backward through the pack. They hesitate when accelerations occur. Batacleti showed none of those signs. Instead, she looked increasingly like an athlete preparing for something special. Meanwhile, Gruvdal continued carrying the burden of leadership. Leading a race may appear straightforward from the outside, but it creates unique challenges. The athlete at the front receives no drafting benefit. The athlete at the front must judge pace accurately. The athlete at the front becomes responsible for every tactical decision. Throughout the race, Gruvdal handled those responsibilities brilliantly. The problem was that Batacleti handled her own responsibilities even better. As the bell approached, the race transformed from an endurance contest into a battle of timing. The Norwegian had spent nearly the entire evening forcing others to react. Now she needed enough strength to resist the inevitable counterattack. The Italian had spent nearly the entire evening conserving energy while remaining in contention. Now she needed to convert patience into victory. Everything pointed toward an explosive conclusion. The crowd sensed it. The athletes sensed it. Even the runners fighting for bronze could feel that the championship was about to be decided. The final lap would not simply determine the winner. It would determine whether Gruvdal's courageous front-running effort could be rewarded with gold, or whether Batacleti's tactical masterpiece would receive the ending it deserved. After more than 4 kilometers of calculation, endurance, positioning, and restraint, the championship was preparing for its defining moment.